Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session, which takes part during Workplace Wellbeing Connect. Welcome to this session. It is all about organisational wellbeing. So not about individual wellbeing, but how we tackle wellbeing as organisations. And for me, one of the most interesting things here is how organisations are addressing this. So understanding how your peers are doing it, understanding what challenges they're finding, what opportunities they're creating. So today I am joined by some wonderful people who are going to be talking to us about those things. My name is Heather Beach and I'm founder and director of Healthy Work Company. We work with organisations on their wellbeing strategy and on their wellbeing training courses internally. And we've just completed a survey on organisational wellbeing. So I'll be dropping some facts and figures into the session from there. I'm joined today, however, by a wonderful panel. I'm joined by Charlie Alberts from Aon, Margo Mosley from Vertex, John Pears from Givaudan, and Nick Wright from Vodafone. And I'm going to be interrogating them about their approaches to wellbeing, both how they addressed it during the pandemic, but also their priorities moving forward, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked, etc., etc. So I'm going to start by asking each of them to introduce themselves. And I'm going to ask for this in a particular way, if you don't mind, lovely panel. I'm going to ask you for what your responsibility is when it comes to wellbeing. So are you global head of? Are you health and safety? Where does it fit? And then tell us about any initiative that you're particularly proud of that took place during lockdown, which really succeeded for you. So I'm going to start with John, because you have already taken your mic off, so you must be ready to go. So John Pears from Givaudan, tell us a bit about who you are.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Pears, head of the EHS field organisation in Givaudan. I'm a co-sponsor of our organisation's approach to wellbeing, together with a senior colleague from HR. And actually, I'm changing roles from next month, where I'm going to be looking at strategic initiatives for EHS, which will include exactly this. That will be one of the strategic initiatives. So it's very much in my responsibility for the next few years.
Amazing. And tell us about one initiative that you're, or two, if you want to, but what are two things you're particularly proud of that you achieved during lockdown, John?
Okay, well, I'll big up your company, Heather, because I think one of the one of the things we did really well early on was realizing we needed to respond, and we did some courses and some training on healthy home working for all of our workers who were no longer able to be on site. And I think what really made me proud of that is we acted pretty quickly for us. It still took about a month to get everything organized, but that is quite fast for a big organization. And we trained 27 of our own people as trainers, with the help of Heather's company. And they in turn trained around 2,000 people within the organization. That's out of about 16,000, of which half of those are operations employees who are on site. So, we got a quarter of the people who are working at home, which I think is a pretty good hit rate. And it was very well received. And there was a big success. And we've now got a bunch of trainers that we're looking to work with, where we can build on that and do a bit more.
I didn't prime you on this, John, but I am so glad you mentioned it, because I'm incredibly proud of that one too. And what I most enjoyed was the fact that it was done in multiple languages. So it was 8 languages in 20 countries in 6 weeks, which was pretty incredible. And I loved listening to it in Spanish. I almost cried hearing our content being delivered in Spanish. It was great. Thank you so much. I don't expect anyone else to big us up, by the way. That's absolutely fine. John, I'll pay you later. Thank you very much. Nick, I'm going to go to you next.
Hi, I'm Nick from Vodafone. Most people have heard of Vodafone. So I'm responsible for health, safety and wellbeing across all of our group functions. So I have a global remit. We operate in lots of different countries around the world, which introduces some real challenges, but it's also makes it a very enjoyable role to basically to fulfill. I guess kind of looking at what worked or what we're most proud of in Vodafone, the first thing that springs to mind really is not an initiative. It's the employees. How they responded was just phenomenal. I've never seen so many people. We have over 100,000 people working in the business. I've never seen so many people come together and support each other as quickly and as meaningfully as I did when we started to go into the lockdown. And that was amazing. It really, at that point there, the business kind of took off, and the employees almost like took the reins from a wellbeing perspective and started. I've never seen so many hints, tips, read this, have you seen this? So really, from my perspective, in the early days, first lockdown, part of it was about catching up with the business and then looking at how we cut through all those communications. So we focused on all sorts. The way we manage health and safety or well-being across the business is we have a decentralized approach to that. So by that, I mean, instead of kind of sitting centrally and saying, right, I'm going to decide what we do and when we do it, and then everyone goes and does that. What we tend to do is take an approach where we say, we have different functions that all have global remits. So I will work with each of the functions and help the functions to develop their plans so that their plans become a lot more aligned with the needs of their workforce, because the functions differ massively in terms of the where they sit and how many people and the activities they undertake. So one of the things we did do during the first lockdown is we took our HRBP population, so our health HR business partners, and we recognised they were under an immense amount of pressure. So we decided to run a pilot with the HRBPs, and the idea of the pilot, and we did this with lots of different initiatives, we would test it in a small population, learn from that, and then release it and scale it, and then allow the functions to adopt either elements or initiatives in their entirety. But we launched a pilot that really landed quite well, and we broke it down into some like key areas. So we introduced the buddy system. So this is around understanding actually people lose the opportunity to meet in work now. And we wanted people to get to know other people, and not just about get to know other people, but be able to understand that other people are struggling, and other people are, have got a lot of priorities and they're not maybe delivering them all. So help people realize they weren't failing. I guess that was the key thing. We also got people to start to draft a personal investment strategy from a wellbeing perspective, which worked really, really well. It got people thinking. We ran educational masterclasses in topics that we had all the HRBP community vote on at the start. So we were delivering what they wanted. We also consolidated all the communications and said, look, there's loads that have gone out across the business. These are the ones you should probably have a look at. And then we also had a Friday 5 initiative. And the Friday 5 was about how do we wrap up the week? How do we get people to start to, move into the weekend and start to recharge their batteries? How do we kind of recognize that people have been doing lots? How do we, reward? How do we wrap up the week? So that was definitely one of the positives for me, and we still see different elements of that initiative play out in the business, and the Friday 5 still happens. So yeah, that's the main one from me.
I absolutely love that idea of the Friday 5, because one of the things obviously that we notice with the ability to homework is the fact that it should be so much better for us as human beings, shouldn't it? To have some form of flexible working, to have some form of being able to manage our lives better by being able to work from home from time to time. But the big danger is people don't know about switching off, do they? They don't know how to switch off, and they feel like they're constantly having to be on. So the idea of closing off the week is a fantastic one. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the Friday 5?
Yeah, so the way we ran it, with the HRBP community, our heads of HR were all on board, and this initiative was designed in consultation with the heads of HR. So the heads of HR would take it in turns each week. All the heads of HR would email in some stuff to the person that was going to be running the Friday at 5 for all the HRBP community, and it would be some kind of top line summary. This is what we've achieved during the week. This is what we've done, this is where we're going, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, but it's okay because this is how we're approaching that. This is who's done particularly well, or someone's gone above and beyond. And then the head of HR would basically record a message, so we didn't have to try and get everyone together at the same time. People could watch them back at their own time, at their own pace. And they basically go through and highlight all these different achievements across the business, call out different people. And we'd start to kind of get some fun stories come through as well, which weren't necessarily work related, but it kind of lightened the mood and it helped people start to transition into the weekend. But we had one where we got some kids involved from the business, and we got people to interview their kids and ask questions. For example, what does mummy or daddy do for a living? I did that with my son. My son's answer to that was he works on the drains. So he clearly doesn't understand.
He has your measure. He knows what you do.
But yeah, so that was really the Friday at 5. It worked very well.
And you know what I really like about that is that it doesn't matter whether you're a huge business like Vodafone or you're a tiny business of 3 or 4 people, that is still relevant and a really great idea to keep hope, stability, those types of things which are so important in times of a bit of crisis going, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Nick. Right, Margo, I'm coming to you next. And I don't know what bridge that is in the background. I should probably know, but it looks very, very lovely.
Well, I'm not there, Heather, so it's okay.
Oh, okay. That's all right then. So, Margo, the reason I've been always very keen to have you on panels is because we were doing training for your managers and you were not there. And they gave us such fantastic feedback on how you at Vertex had managed the lockdown. We had comments like, we're so lucky to work for this business. You know, they've really looked after us. They've really cared for us. And I was really interested in unpicking those initiatives with you because some of them were quite prescriptive, weren't they? But that seemed to really work for people. So do you want to just say, before I launch into that, just say who you are, how come which bit of wellbeing you're responsible for, which part of the world, etc.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Margo Mosley, and I'm Director for Environment, Health, Safety and Sustainability at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. And I cover the UK and international region, which currently comprises Europe, Brazil and Australia for us. And somebody else takes care of our Americas region. So I'm also part of the International Wellbeing Steering Group, which was set up to drive the wellbeing agenda. So that comprises 2 senior leaders from our international leadership team, HR, and the associated sections of that, including our benefits team, communications, and also EH&S. And as part of that, I really specialize on the mental health aspects. And it's working okay so far, I think, that plan. And as Heather mentioned, we did receive some good feedback from employees about our response. I think we, as others have mentioned, I think the key was, being able to pivot very quickly and adapt to the changing environment and get things off the ground. So we had a number of initiatives planned already. We were able to speed them up, get training moving quicker, change it to virtual training, and other things. So, but I think overall, one of the key things that helped support people's well-being was our communication strategy. So I know we're here to talk about well-being and there's all those initiative type stuff, but really it was, doing our best to work through that minefield of, what's going on where in the world, giving clear communication about what we as a business were going to do. So, straight away, whether that was work from home, what people would receive to help support them working from home. Because initially, these are the things that people want to know. What's going on? Am I going to have the computer equipment I need to work comfortably and safely at home? What about if I can't do my full hours? What happens with that? I've got children, I've got other people I need to take care of. So we implemented a temporary flex work policy. So people were able to change their hours, change the times of the day that they were working. So really maximum flexibility. Another key thing, which was quite prescriptive, as Heather mentions, is the Synchronous Days Off. So we're an international business, and of course, public holidays around the world fall on slightly different days. It's amazing how different they are across the world. So a decision was made to link up some of those so that if it was a global holiday in the US, it would be now a global holiday for Vertex in the Europe and Australia region as well, so that people just knew they could completely switch off like they should do on a day off. But, it was it felt good for people to be able to have that comfort of everybody else is off, so it's fine, I can relax. Also, Zoom free zones in the day where people can know that, you know, they're not going to be, nobody's required to appear on camera, but just extra, you know, prescriptive if you like, but just really clear direction that, you know, yeah, no Zoom during that time to give people that break. I know it's not had much good press recently, the Wellness Wednesday, obviously in isolation, that is not a wellbeing strategy, merely something to support it. So that's what we implemented, Wellbeing Wednesday. It's a 2-hour time slot where people can take that time to support their well-being, whether that be sort of physical activity, things to support their mental health, whatever it may be. And that's time for them in the middle of the week, hopefully offering a nice little zone for them to take up those activities. Yeah, and of course, manager training, which has been the subject of a lot of reports, you know, really key. You know, it's not just about training for employees and how they can support their well-being and resilience, but making sure managers are aware of what behaviours may cause certain stressful situations and how they can support their employees and during this time as well, and how to do that in the virtual sense, something that some people are not that familiar with. You know, how do you spot when people are struggling virtually? So yeah, those were some of the things that we did.
Well, yeah, thank you, Margo. And I think it is incredibly interesting, and we'll explore this more as we go, how different organisations have tackled this quite differently from the point of view of how prescriptive they've been. And what really seemed to work for your culture and your audience was being quite prescriptive, telling people you have this time off and you must take it. And I really get that. People really enjoy that. And then we've also got customers at the other end of the spectrum that say, oh, it's just been all work it out with your manager, improve communication with your manager, and all of that type of thing, which is a lot more reliant on those managers really being good managers, isn't it? And knowing what they're doing. And I must admit, our survey, and I have promised you I'm going to pepper facts throughout this, but our survey showed that only 43% of managers have been trained in looking after their employees' well-being. And many of those, about 50%, have actually been in mental health first aid. And I actually don't think that is the most appropriate course for a manager. It doesn't cover anything about their legal obligations or how to keep a well team, how to manage psychological safety, etc. So manager training seems to be a big gap from a wellbeing perspective. So good to hear that you obviously have done that. Right, I'm going to move finally, last but certainly not least, the wonderful Charlie Alberts. So Charlie is going to speak to us from 2 points of view, because Charlie is with Aon. So he has customers he can talk about, and also what they've done at Aon as well. So do you want to just talk about your responsibilities and who you are, first of all, Charlie, and then move on to that?
Excellent. Hi, Heather, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. As Heather said, I'm Charles Alberts, and I work for an organisation called Aon. So we're a global professional services firm. We're in 120 countries and employ about 50,000 colleagues around the world as well. I have a few different hats that I wear. I lead our wellbeing solutions team in the UK, where we work with a diverse range of organisations to improve their health and wellbeing, both UK smaller organisations right through to large multinational organisations as well. Obviously, given my day job, I will also have some responsibilities internally in terms of employee health and well-being and mental health, and then I also volunteer on the board of my local mental health charity, which is Dorset Mind, that I recently joined and I'm enjoying very much so far. If I just kind of think about some of the things that I've observed over the last 12 to 18 months that have really stood out for me as top initiatives. Because I think, as you've just heard, there's been some amazing activity by organizations, and I've just been bowled over by the creativity that we've seen in bringing people together during what has been the most challenging time in our lives, certainly. I've really been inspired by how much greater focus there has been on health and well-being, more so than ever before. And we're talking about, mental health, which has been rising up the agenda, but at unprecedented levels, which is fantastic. And we're seeing that right from kind of top senior leadership down through the organization. For many organizations that we work with during COVID has been the first time they've kind of taken that step to starting to engage people in mental health. So it's been a real catalyst. And linked to that, something I'm really passionate about is kind of social connection and this wrong of loneliness that we see in our societies. And it's been fantastic how, it's been unfortunate, I have to say, but at the same time, great that COVID-19's brought this into our consciousness. So we're now seeing it as something that impacts, the whole nation, not just, older people, which often is an incorrect assumption that's made. The other thing that I've seen COVID do is really expedite plans in organizations. So many are doing things around well-being. Many had some plans with trying to work on budget, getting the budget together, trying to work on a business case to launch it. For many organizations, that's really been expedited, and we've seen great action on that. The final thing I'll say, or probably a couple of things, if I may, Heather, the one has been communication throughout organizations, and definitely at Aon included, has been fantastic. The way that organizations have engaged with their people, again, right from the top down, has been great to see. At Aon, for instance, we've had a weekly video message from our global CEO. And it's amazing, you're talking about kind of keeping people inspired, helping to set our minds at ease, keeping us all on track. It's been invaluable to help that. And then we've had different messages at leaders levels down. Just an anecdote that I've kind of noticed recently through our own global wellbeing survey is that I think COVID-19's been a real leveler, not only in terms of us as humans, as individuals, but amongst companies, but also amongst regions around the world. So if we rewind 2 years and we look at kind of APAC's wellbeing focus and priorities was quite different to EMEA. Suddenly, when we look at this survey, we see there's this alignment around the world of the issues that are really important. I think that's going to be really powerful for organizations who are working on global health and wellbeing strategies.
Because you've also done a bigger survey than we have, haven't you? You've done a one that's global, that covers priorities for organizations, et cetera, et cetera. Ours is a bit more UK focused and more looking at what organizations are doing. You've looked more at the business case side, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we conducted it's not about size. We had about 1,648 responses, across 25 languages and so on and so on. Some good insights from organizations into the state of health and well-being at the moment and what they're planning. I think there were a few insights for me from that survey. I'm always pleasantly surprised the extent to which the UK is more sophisticated and evolved around this. And I'm sure many of you in global organizations would see that we often lead the way, and that's brilliant. I think organizations see a really kind of strong correlation between well-being and business results. And for us, that kind of survey is really honed in on that. But yet business leaders have conflicting priorities. We still have a job to do to get well-being right up there as one of them, because the kind of other things that they have to focus on, not out of choice, just in terms of business survival, often takes precedence. We're not yet making that clear link by how important our people are to business survival and thriving.
One thing that was really interesting from our survey related to that is the fact that about 50% of wellbeing strategies from the organisations we surveyed are led by HR or health and safety. However, where it is led by HR and health and safety, they've generally failed to train their senior team. So that's a first sort of step to get the senior team understanding why this matters to them and what it's all about, and getting them on board with the strategy, I think is really, really important. So I thought that was a very interesting piece. Conversely, where it's led by the senior team and there isn't an HR or health and safety person involved, there's been fewer initiatives that have taken place. So in an ideal world, you want both working together, don't you? You want HR, health and safety, and all departments working together. So very interesting. Thanks, Charlie. Nick, you've got your hand up.
I know, yeah. I wanted to see if the icon worked.
It does.
No, I do have a point. I just wanted to build on a point that's just been made, because I completely agree. And this is about well-being being aligned with strategy and driving the business. I think most businesses went into business continuity. How do we maintain a business when we moved into the lockdown? And I think they suddenly realised that a resilient business has resilient people. So well-being, absolutely, the profile has gone through the roof. The one point I did want to make, though, and this is partly through experience, that we talk very often about new initiatives, and I think through the pandemic, people responsible for health, safety, and well-being have been under a lot of pressure to keep on developing new things and deliver new things, and and be seen to be leading the way. And what I say to people is, actually, sometimes it's about doing the basics right. A lot of the times companies have lots of really, really good things in place. Where it falls down is how well you communicate those things, how accessible those things are. So it's not always about having to be, put the pressure on yourself to develop new and innovative ways of managing well-being. So I just wanted to quickly just throw that point in.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're going to come to this later, aren't we? That it is often dealt with as a series of initiatives. And actually, if you can develop it as a way of being, like, this is just part of who we are. Our managers operate this way. They think about people. When we develop a new policy, we think about how it's going to impact our people. That's really ideal, isn't it? In a sense, it's better than having a bunch of initiatives. Charlie, you've taken yourself off mute. Did you want to say something?
Thank you. I didn't know how to raise my hand. Brilliant hosting. Thanks, Heather. No, I just wanted to agree with what Nick was saying. Some of our own research that we did in a Rising Resilient report last year kind of showed this disconnect between the various kind of health and well-being interventions that clients or employers offer versus what their employees think they offer. So far fewer employees are actually aware of how the employer is supporting their health and well-being, and we really need to bridge that gap. The other point is about impact. It's not just about the latest, flashiest thing, but actually asking yourself the question is, what is my strategy? And is the interventions that I'm delivering actually having an impact on people's health and well-being? And that's where looking at your data becomes so important. And I know we'll talk a bit more about that later on.
Thanks, Charlie. Right, I'm now going to get into some of my pre-prepared questions, but audience, please do pop a question into the Q&A box, and they're going to come to me via the chat box. We've already got one here, and it leads very nicely into my first question, actually. I'm going to ask you, John, first of all, please. So the question is, where are you with a return to the workplace? And what is your current biggest challenge?
Okay, well, I think the first thing to say on this topic is actually, half of our workforce have been in the workplace the whole time. We have factory operations around the world, and actually the work from home was driven by legislation, but also by protecting the workforce who had to be on site. Because we very much wanted this approach that they are the people who cannot work from home. So in terms of good health and safety professional looking at risk assessment and how do you manage the risk on site. So so the question for us is really then, how do you get the people working from home back to work, and where are we? And it's different in different countries, and you see things changing every week now. So China was back at work very quickly. The US is now, there's a big push there. Obviously the UK starting to relax rules. In Switzerland's just changed its approach from compulsory work at home unless you need to be in the workplace to now more, it's not everyone back to work, but it's companies manage it. So you manage it based on, again, risk assessment and so on. So it is different in different countries. In some countries are still very much in lockdown. So we're trying to manage that through we have a network of company managers, for all of our legal entities around the world. They're the lead role. And in a bit like Nick said, we're also a very decentralized company. So it's trying to get the balance between corporate guidance and local responsibility and local knowledge. And it's very much the way we're handling it. So I've been part of the crisis management team as well for the pandemic, in one of the two main people supporting the company managers with guidance. And then on top of that, we've also had a buddy system with our executive committee. So really making sure people are involved right at the top. So all of the company managers have an exco buddy that they can go to also for some of the leadership issues not directly related to the crisis management team. So between that is working very well to provide the right advice and support and assistance on the site. So yeah, it's still mixed. It's still very early in terms of getting back to anything resembling normal, and we're still also also trying to put ourselves in the mind of the employees. Well, we're in the same position working from home, and we've got people who are desperate to get back to the office, and we've got people who really don't want to go back, either because they still don't think it's safe, or because actually they like working at home and it's a nice way to work. So again, trying to come up with different approaches for different people and manage it one step at a time, I think is the first.
And that, I guess, would be the subsequent question, really, is how are you managing that return? I mean, we've got organizations that are doing such different things. A lot of people are looking at phases and a bit of a period of experimentation. And then there's really, are you kind of doing A teams and B teams, or are you saying, it's a free for all? What sorts of rules have you got in place?
So, for example, switching to local mode. So the office I'm based out of near Zurich, we've limited the number of people. So up until now, it's been you can go into the office if there's a good reason to do so, and there's a way of sort of requesting that and getting approved. What we've done now is we've put limits in the open plan and in the total numbers on site, and we've allocated certain days to certain functions. So if you want to do something as a team and physically get together as a team, and some of those social things we've been missing, then for my team the day is Thursday. So we want to do something, we go on Thursday, and we know that it's not going to be completely chock-a-block with everybody else in there and unmanageable in terms of numbers on site. So just trying to bring in some practical things. And we've also opened, the sun is shining at last. We've opened, some of the more outdoor areas where we can have stand-up meetings and gatherings outdoors, where it's maybe people feel a bit more comfortable rather than being inside the building with masks on. So that's just one of the. So we're getting the person with the local legal responsibility really to design the rules. With some help from us and sharing some of the best practice.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to come to you on that one now, Margo. So what sort of approach are you taking? Obviously, you're a global organization too, so you're going to have the same, it's different where it happens to be in the world, but are you being kind of prescriptive, or are you being more flexible?
Yeah, so a lot of what John said resonated with me. As you know, we're a pharmaceutical company, so we do have research and development labs. So of course, those are people that cannot work from home. We've also got manufacturing in the US as well. So again, it's been about prioritizing those people being able to be on site. And last year we did have various offices reopen for, albeit a short period of time in some areas. And I think it's so challenging because, if we look right now, the region that I'm responsible for, I've got Brazil, Europe and Australia. and they're each in a very different place in the pandemic. So our Australia office is open. They're having fun out there. They're out at restaurants and full theatre, and everything, and back in the office, and things are getting a little bit more normal for them. And UK, we are looking closely at what the government guidance is there, but the current guidance looks like we might the 21st of June date might be getting pushed back. So again, a bit tricky. Our Brazil office is not going to be open for some time yet. So, and I think that's the challenge with all of this is managing the employee expectation, because although they're aware there's government guidance around the world, and we have to look at that firstly as well as our own policies. It's just there's no clear timetable, is there? Your best made plans. We do plan. We hope to get some people back to the office this summer, but it depends. So, and that's really hard. Not many things are like that in business, where you're not in control of in that way. So we did last year have a sort of phased approach to our ramp up of our R&D facilities. So those people, the lab workers, initially returned a small cohort back, really critical staff, and then built the numbers up from there as we saw how our COVID measures played out, and to establish that employee comfort. And I think that's the key thing. Government guidance is of course one thing, but making sure that employees feel that the move back to the office is appropriate, and helping to manage that. As John mentioned, there's people that would go back tomorrow if you said they could. There's other people that are like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a go. And then there's other people that are incredibly nervous about it for several reasons, perhaps. So it's, and you're trying to manage all of that. And as much as the change from going to remote working was a big step, then the coming back to the office is also going to be another big step. So, there's lots of challenges there. So at the moment, we are working about how we plan for that. And one of the things we've done is committed to making sure we give employees notice. So they'll get as much notice as possible. And we've said at least a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, in our plans to return to the office. And in the initial steps, it's going to be all voluntary. So nobody's going to, even if your office is open, it's not okay, your office is open, get back there. It's all voluntary. So it's very, very stepwise, very flexible. And I think that's, we're trying to manage people's, anxieties there. And I think that's the right thing to do,
Thanks, Margo. Yeah, I think lots of people are seeing it as a very stepped approach, aren't they? Charlie, I'm going to ask you before I come to you, Nick, because, we have got a really interesting situation ahead of us, haven't we? In that, I think our survey said 66%. I think other surveys I've said have seen up to 80% of organisations are intending to let people work flexibly moving forward, if they can, like if they're in a role which allows them to. So we've got all sorts of things to get over there as well, haven't we? And somebody has asked in the chat box, will there be any resentment towards people who choose not to return to the office, preferring more flexible hours? And I mean, what also has been occurring, people have been talking about, is will there be like a 2-tier, like I'm in the office, therefore I'm going to get promoted and noticed. And actually, if I'm not in the office, nobody sees me. So we've got tons of issues like that to experiment with, to work out, haven't we? I mean, what have you seen on what organisations are looking at in the return to work?
Yeah, gosh, Heather. I mean, it's such a big issue, and I think it's so great that we are asking these questions now. We're really thinking about not sleepwalking into, what I previously referred to as like a health crisis. Let's recognize the impact on people's health, but also in terms of the engagement with the workplace. We don't have all the answers, and I like kind of the way you described it about some experimentation that we need to let's trial this. Let's see what works, what doesn't work. we're trying to ultimately, cater for the needs of diverse workforces. We've done a lot of work to create diversity in the workplace in all its beautiful shapes and forms. And one of those things is people, will want different things. Some would want to stay at home, the whole time. Others want to go into the office the whole time. And some of them might not fully have a choice. So we don't all have the facilities at home. I feel really lucky. I've got this little box room that I can work in with some nice light and so on. But I recognise, many people are not that fortunate. The issues I think you've raised, we really have to think about. How do we make sure that we don't lose the best of the workplace? Why would we go into an office and think about the real estate costs and the lighting and the air conditioning and all that for someone just to sit behind a desk and just stare at their screen and just do work? That doesn't seem sensible now that our eyes have been opened to this. But how do we use the workplace as somewhere where people come together, where they collaborate, where they can network, where they can learn from one another, all of those good things, and have a balance between the two? I'm really a pro of the new agile working methodology, where we can also attract more talent into the business. We can cast the net a lot wider. Think about people with disabilities, where previously they weren't necessarily able to get into the office. Think about fantastic talent if you're in London that's maybe up in, I don't know, Newcastle or up in Edinburgh, and suddenly you open up your doors to all of that kind of great talent. I feel a little bit disappointed when I see some of the headlines of big organizations who have made decisions that no, we're just going back to work the way it was before. I think we're missing the point that employees' eyes have also been opened a little bit. And I think what people are going to be demanding in the future is going to be different. We need to be ready for that. This is a big, if I look at our global wellbeing survey that I mentioned earlier on, one of employers' top concerns, top 5, is attracting and retaining talent. So we need to be careful that we don't lose people inadvertently by not being flexible enough around this. Final thing I'll just kind of mention, just to think about, because I was on a part of a discussion last week that I found one little tidbit quite interesting. Is one of the presenters compared flexible versus agile working. So a couple of different terminologies that we sometimes use interchangeably, but flexible is often around kind of ways of working hours, some structure around, input from the employee. Agile really is about removing some of the barriers that structure might provide, and letting people do the best work at the best time for them. So when we think about terminology, think about the difference between flexible and agile, and be clear about where you're really aiming with this.
And I've also heard hybrid. So hybrid seems to be hybrid's more akin to flexible, I guess, than agile. I don't know. What do you think?
I think hybrid probably is. So that's where people have some choice about days, for instance, or about hours or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that could be a mix of the two. And the two are quite different, right?
Yeah.
We need to think about how much freedom and flexibility do we want to give people.
Mm-hmm.
Are we on a journey here? Again, we're talking about testing things, seeing if they work. Do we perhaps want to offer some more flexibility, see the pros and cons, and then perhaps adjust as well?
And I guess it depends also, even in that, on the nature of your work. So can your work be measured by output, or does it have to be measured by hours, doesn't it, as well? That's another aspect. Nick, you've been so quiet. I'm coming to you next. What do you think about this conversation?
I've been unusually quiet, granted. Yeah. So I think everyone's made really valid points, actually. From a Vodafone perspective, we've very much been talking to the business for a while now. Very, very early on in the pandemic, we started to talk to the business. Lots of surveys, lots of meaningful discussions taking place, just to get an idea of where do you want to be? Where do you want this business to go? What works best for you? Yeah. So we're fairly comfortable, actually, with the information that we have, which is helping us take the next step, the right step, at the right time. And the time is the bit that's very flexible, because it's very much dependent on a lot of local governments and in different countries. We've already started to redesign our workplace. We talk very much about co-creation. Realistically, we don't see people sat in an office on emails. But what I will say at that point, though, is we are very clear on a set of criteria that we will apply when it looks at who needs to be in an office and who wants to be in an office. And actually, if the office environment is a safer environment or more conducive to a better working, then we will accommodate you to come in the office. We will absolutely support that. So we're not putting any pressure anywhere, but we're giving people options. But we're piloting these as well. So we're going to start to pilot and visually kind of monitor how people use the space that we've redesigned, so that we can start taking away that learning, going, is this the behavior that we thought was going to play out, or is this behavior that we hadn't anticipated? And if so, does that mean what do we need to go back and review and refresh? So the only other point I'll make, and it just builds on a point that was made earlier, there is it's really important that when you're doing your plan, you've got the right people around the table. So it's not just health and safety people talking to health and safety people. We have property, we have comms, we have employee experience. We have a really diverse panel of people that are all throwing different perspectives into the mix. Comms is vital on this one, because what we plan and what we talk about needs to land effectively in the business. And that just very quickly onto my last point. As a business, and I see a lot of businesses talking very positively about the next steps. I think companies should be really careful to make sure that they don't assume that positivity translates to confidence to return. So it's okay being positive as a business, but let's not assume that because we're positive, because we've been part of the planning, that everyone else is going to be confident based on the planning that we've completed. So it's just sometimes you feel like you're being the pessimist when you're sat there and go, how does that play out? How is that message received? Could it be received in a way that we hadn't intended it to be received? Sometimes it's about trying to think about it from a different angle, just to test whether what you're doing is right, how you're going to communicate it is correct, and the timeline that you've got in mind to start implementing is realistic.
I think those are really, really great points. I think I love the involvement of comms, and certainly Margo, you referred to that as well as being one of your great successes during the period, didn't you? And I mean, I think it's such a difficult one in order to get right, isn't it? That level that you put wellbeing at, because you do need somebody to actually do the work. So you need somebody who's going to put those things into practice that you've agreed. You need somebody who's going to get everybody around the table. But you do need buy-in from everywhere, and particularly from that senior team. It has to be in their DNA that this is who they are, this is who they want to be. Because I was chatting to a friend earlier about the fact that I know 3 wellbeing professionals who are in the middle of a burnout right now, and they're in the middle of a burnout because they were placed at too junior a level in the organization. They've got their health and wellbeing masters, they know what they want to do, but they cannot actually make any of that happen because they don't have buy-in in the right quarters because they're too junior. So again, it's just being aware that this has to be, and I know, John, you and I talked during the pandemic about what you were doing, and you were building you ended up building a really senior group of people, didn't you, who were driving this forward. Can you just explain about that, what happened there?
Yeah, well, it was accident rather than design, but it was early on in the pandemic, and that point when people saying somebody should do something about this, and then us all realizing it was us that should do something about this. So we had what was initially an unofficial group that we just called ourselves the employee engagement team, and then became official. But it was myself. We had the head of learning and development. We had the head of corporate compliance. We had head of corporate comms. So we had quite a lot of senior people from different functions, also shared services. So, really a range of people who were just interested in the topic and wanted to do something to make a difference. And we just started meeting once a week, just chewing over some options, and then quickly got into some some things we could do. I mean, one of the outputs from that group was a project we got called the Silver Linings Project. So that's now looking at all sorts of things around simplification, which is one of the things we saw is getting in the way of well-being when things are too complicated to get things done. But also, let's say, more traditional topics like flexible working, and where we want to go in the future, and also use of offices, smart travel, not going back to when we can travel, not going back to the old way of travel, but doing things in a way that makes more sense and is, puts people more at the center of what we're doing. So all sorts of good things have come out of that, and yeah, still a lot more ideas to come.
Margo, you came off mute there for a moment. Did you want to speak on that as well?
I was just going to say, to kind of back up what Nick was saying about communications. I mean, that was a real eye-opener for me, working so in depth with the communications team on a lot of this COVID stuff and the wellbeing stuff. And they were amazing because, of course, that's there. Of course, we can design, the mental health training and the mental health strategy or wellbeing strategy and stuff. But they really, brought that to life and helped us reach the employees with it, which of course is the important bit. We can have all the strategy we want. So that was really key. And I just wanted to pick up as well about, when we're thinking about returning, just how important our employee surveys and feedback are going to be. We've been doing those all the way through, the pulse surveys, extra specific COVID ones. We've also got a mechanism for direct feedback, anonymous feedback from employees about, and we get all sorts through that. Some of it weird and wonderful, but it's great. You know what's happening. And I think that's really important because you can't predict how different people are feeling. There are so many different versions of people's experience because everyone's an individual, right? And I think, to Nick's point, we've got to try and make sure that we encompass all of that in our plans, haven't we? So that everybody has the opportunity to work in the best way that fits them and, in that way, help the business, succeed as well. If everybody can give their best, then that's how we get the business done. So, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I was hoping that, this might relax off a bit this year, but I think not. So to your point about wellbeing professionals and burnout, then yeah, it is a bit of a hazard, I think.
100%, it is, isn't it? It is. Yeah, very, very interesting points there. I mean, and actually this one about feedback, well, I think there was two things that came out of that. The first is the communications piece, which really, health and safety. I mean, we should have learned that by now, shouldn't we? that so much of it comes into how you communicate this stuff, but it's got put in our faces, hasn't it? That we couldn't get by without it. Yeah. And then the second one is feedback. So again, I think this has been something which has really come to the fore during this pandemic, hasn't it? Is that we mostly maybe did an HR engagement survey once every couple of years. And then we maybe went and examined a couple of those topics and stuck the rest of it under a carpet, hoped it would go away. But understanding where people are with their wellbeing and what kinds of things in the organisation are causing stress, what they'd like to see, that's fundamental, isn't it? And obviously, Margo, you've stepped up your activity in that area. John, is that something that Givaudan has been particularly hot on as well?
Not quite there yet. We've done quite a lot of pulse surveys, but they've mostly been local. So really getting some good feedback, but more locally organised. And what we are discussing now is how to do that more corporately and get a better view of what's happening and how people feel. We have done a lot more consultation, so more, let's say, more meaningful than just a survey, but looking at certain topics and getting good inputs about what people want. And how to develop some of the things going forward, including around the whole health and wellbeing piece and what they expect from Givaudan to make their lives a bit easier. Brilliant,
thank you. And Nick, do you have anything that you've done it because you're normally ahead of the curve at Vodafone? What have you been doing on that front?
Just put the pressure. I mean, for us, it's kind of more of the same. As you say, we've been very good at pulling together metrics and data and consultation. It's kind of just something that we do as a business. So we had lots of mechanisms in place anyway. We just, utilize those mechanisms for different purposes. So I don't think we've been doing anything new. Maybe we've kind of dialed up the frequency with some of our pulse surveys, just so that we can get, really quick feedback, and just being agile, really. I think the key to success when you're going through a pandemic, when there's so many changes, is the ability to be able to respond quickly. The horizon kind of changes, or the environment changes so often. Going in with a very kind of fixed idea that you think, actually, this is it, this is what we do, and everyone, I need everyone to buy into it. That doesn't seem to work. It's this idea that actually, let's have a set of principles. What are the priorities? And then how or who do we need to work with to deliver them? And then how do we know that they're successful? And that's where the metrics and the pulse surveys and the forums and the consultations and the interview, that's where all that kind of data comes in. But we get this information from all of our markets as well. So we're constantly able to kind of keep track of where we are and the direction we need to go.
So we've got 5 minutes left, and we've had a great question about challenges, because I've asked you all about the positives. You've had a chance to really glow. So I want to ask you now about what your biggest organizational and personal challenge has been from a wellbeing perspective. So I'm going to start with Charlie. I'm not sure if that's fair to ask you, but I'm going to start with you. You're smiling.
I'm always smiling. Gosh, my biggest personal well-being challenge through this period, and probably is similar to many others, is just where do you draw that line on your workday ending? I ended up early on working all hours that were given to me, and that definitely wasn't very good for my health, my physical health, but I started becoming quite grumpy as well, which is unlike me. So I think we spoke a bit about that commute, or that kind of breaking for me at 6 p.m. every night has been one of the best things I've done, because I then go for a walk with my dogs, and to me that has been my transition mentally and physically from work to home. So that's been great. And that's all I'll kind of say. I'm just conscious of time, Heather.
I could totally get that. And I do that in the morning with the dog, but you've just given me the idea. I have a terrible evening routine. So I'm going to do exactly the same in the evening now. Why didn't I think of that before? Brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. Right. I'm going to come to you then. Nick, you've got your mic on.
Oh, so
personal challenge and organizational challenge.
Probably the organizational challenge will come back to comms again. So it sounds silly, Vodafone talking about comms being a challenge, but yeah, back to a point I made previously, getting people to know, to know where to go and what support's available, how to access it. Yeah, the biggest challenge was having to keep on telling people that, so that it's always on their mind. They always kind of know. And then, training managers, senior managers, and all those kind of things. So that was something we found we had to keep on doing, because it kept coming out of pulse surveys. We should do more of this. And actually, we do that. This is where we do it, type thing. I guess the personal challenge was there's, and I guess a lot of wellbeing people might have experienced this, that I think I put too much pressure on myself to try and meet all of the needs for the entire business. There were so many different priorities coming out of the business that if you try and meet all of them, then you dilute the quality of everything. So actually, I learned very quickly to kind of say, look, let's really focus on the things we need to focus on, and not just keep on running after hot topics. So it's I felt that put a lot of pressure on me in the business.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's a great lesson to learn, one we could all do with. Thank you. Right, you've got 1 minute each. Margo, so greatest organizational and personal challenge.
So organizational challenge, I just think the global nature, you know, having conversations with my US counterparts and explaining why the situation was different in the UK or Australia, and like, you know, around the COVID rules, and just explaining what people in those countries might be experiencing, you know, if that country was experiencing, you know, quite a surge and, you know, the anxiety there around COVID. So that was definitely a big challenge. And then personal challenge, just, I think to Nick's point, setting your expectations for yourself way too high. I was on 3 different crisis management teams in the business, doing my day job. The team members, you know, somebody left, somebody was pregnant and couldn't be on site. So it was like perfect storm of things. So definitely going to be kinder to myself in 2021. So lessons learned.
I'll be keeping an eye on you for that then, Margo. That's lovely to hear. Thank you. And finally, to lovely John Pears.
Okay, I'll say for both is bad habits. As you know, I had a bike accident last year and injured myself. And the worst thing for me was sitting in this chair at this desk day in, day out, and I was signed off 50%. And I learned to manage my calendar properly because I only had 50%. And now I'm back to my old bad habits of filling every minute, accepting every invitation to a meeting, and I need to find a way to do that without the injury.
You need our healthy habit training, John. That's what you need. And on that note, thank you all. You've been an absolutely wonderful panel. Thank you all so much for your time today. And thank you to those brilliant questions from the audience. If you would like to either see Aon's survey or ours, you can go to the Aon website or the Healthy Work Company website, and you can get it from there. But have a wonderful show. It's been lovely to be with you all today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.